America is addicted to incarceration. Juvenile delinquents are defined by their problems and not by their potential, and that is particularly true of youth of color. Hello, my name is Chris Gray. I'm the Executive Director of Timebanks USA. Timebanking is a way of rewarding each hour given in community service or helping another. And with that simple premise, it says each one of us has the potential to contribute. Recently, Timebanks USA held a conference in Madison, Wisconsin, where we launched our Racial Justice Initiative. That initiative will be moving forward with a new legal strategy to end racial disparity. We're going to be starting with juvenile justice and child welfare, because those two systems are actually deepening the problem and they're burdening their communities, and that has to change. The film that you are about to see is a compilation of the highlights from the Racial Justice Initiative Forum in Madison, Wisconsin. I invite you to come together in your communities to continue the dialogue and become part of the change.
When a jurisdiction tells you it's impossible to reduce racial and ethnic disparities, they are lying.
You walk into a juvenile court in almost any major city in this country, and what you see are black and brown faces.
If I'm looking at the years ahead, there are going to be more children who are destroyed, more children who are denied equal access, equal justice, who are denied the opportunity to be the people they're supposed to be, that they were meant to be.
Juvenile detention is the gateway drug to our nation's addiction to incarceration, and is sort of the first step down this slippery slope that leads us to have by far the highest incarceration rates in the world. And when it comes to who we lock up, is a shameful system of control and punishment of people of color.
The system, they don't want to save us, I feel. But you guys here, don't save us. Help us. Rescue ourselves.
For years now, there has been a mandate to do something about disparities, disproportionate minority contact or involvement in the juvenile justice system. There have been similar mandates when it comes to schools and special education, similar mandates when it comes to protecting families and not taking kids away from families. But we know who gets put out of schools. We know who gets put in detention. We know who gets yanked out of families and put into foster care. In order to deal with some of the issues, we're going to have to develop a new kind of legal approach, and that's why you have this law review article that says we're making an offer you can't refuse. Cynthia Robbins, my colleague and co-worker and team leader on this, will be telling you more about the legal theory explicitly later on. With that, I'm not going to talk anymore. You don't need to hear from me. We need to hear from the voices from the field, and I'm going to ask first Yakua Banks and Frank D'Agostino to come up and start sharing their story.
My name is Yakua Banks. It's an African name. It means born on Thursday, one who walks with God. I guess since birth I was a fighter. I was stillborn due to my mother being on drugs, and to the system that means an unfit parent. My grandmother raised me. She died when I was 13, and I guess that's when you would say all hell broke loose. I was stealing to get attention. I wanted attention. I wanted someone to tell me that they loved me. Praying every night, missing my grandmother, still fighting, still stealing, and then I was arrested and sitting in the youth house for 6-7 months at a time. Told me that they didn't want me in New Jersey. They shipped me off to Pennsylvania, to Florida. And they told me that until I was 21, I had to go to Massachusetts. So I set a fire. That was my way of saying, no, I'm not going. You will not ship me off. I am not a box with just nothing in it. The system, they don't want to save us, I feel. But you guys here, don't save us. Help us. Rescue ourselves. Thank you.
If you take two similarly situated juveniles, same age, same offenses, same family structure, same school attendance record, you account for every factor out there, the juvenile of color is still more likely to receive a punitive outcome than the white juvenile. This is not to say that these race effects are the product of overt or intentional discrimination. Instead, what researchers believe is that they are more likely the product of unconscious bias, stereotyping. The new term of art in legal academia is cognitive bias or implicit bias, which can be measured.
People are racist, and they don't want to claim that sometimes. Mm-hmm. They want to say it's because of the neighborhood, the economics, they just cause more trouble. And it's easier to push it away than to claim that we live in a system, an institution that is so racist that it's destroying families. It's creating almost a genocide effect on different ethnic and racial groups of people in our country.
In most states around the country, corrections budgets are among the largest, if not the largest, expenditure at the state level. In many states, they've overcome what we spend on the university system. I mean, that's tragic. When I first came to Wisconsin in 1975, we had an incarceration rate of 47 per 100,000 individuals. It's now over about 400 per 100,000. I mean, think about that. That's a 9-fold increase. And it wasn't driven by crime. It was driven by policy.
But for the presence of race bias in juvenile justice decision-making, minority overrepresentation, this sea of black and brown faces in the juvenile justice system would not exist to the same degree, and that's incontrovertible.
Let's be really clear about detention. It is a system that is arbitrary in its application, discriminatory in terms of the race and ethnicity of the kids who are affected. It is enormously costly, and I would dare say that the majority of you in this room, if you knew what people like Vinny and James and I do about what goes on in these facilities, if you knew what they were like, you would lay your body down before you let your kid actually get in behind those locked gates. So the harm is substantial. Kids who get detained are more likely to be adjudicated. They're more likely to be placed out of home. And if you don't think that has lifetime effects, you're not studying what the literature tells us about the worse odds that kids face after they have gone through detention and incarceration in juvenile justice.
It's not the thuggers and the muggers. It's not the carjackers and the murderers. That's probably about 4% of your detention population. Probation violations, placement failures, I'm sure you failed a placement, and bench warrants or failure to appear. All administrative, all having nothing to do with public safety. If we handle those 4 populations with an eye towards kids of color, you give me a year and we will reduce those numbers instantly, because I can tell you right now, kids of color are in for those 4 offenses.
What the data say, in short, is that detention, as Chris mentioned in the last panel, is driven by policy and practice decisions that adults make. It is not driven by the behavior of adolescents. And therefore, the focus of change needs to be not on the behavior of youth, but on the behavior of the adults who work in and manage the system.
we have to look at these things as if, and the systemic reform and these bureaucracies, as if they're living, breathing things that are going to fight back when we try to change them. Yep. And if you come into it any other way, you're going to fail. You come to fight against the incarceration of African American men in America, you better come to play, right? You better be fully padded and be ready to take the hits.
So you get the problem. A juvenile justice system that's racially biased and a solution that's not a solution. Because just throwing kids in jail is not exactly a great platform for success, right? For the last 10 years, the Time Dollar Youth Court has found a real alternative to incarcerating youth. Here's what some of those kids had to say.
I solemnly swear or vow.
That
I will not divulge. Any information.
In the course of this
youth court case presentation.
That
I will keep secret. All said proceeded. With your head in my presence. Please be seated.
If I had to explain to somebody like an adult why youth court is important to the youth, because it gives you a second chance, because maybe you made a mistake and like you regret it, so you'll have a second chance instead of going to jail doing time someplace you don't belong. You can come here, realize what you did wrong, correct it, don't do it again, and move on with your life.
Youth court, man, I could say youth court, cause me, I ain't got no father, so I could say youth court is like my father.
I had 250 hours, community service hours, on my resume because of this youth court process, really. And it's been really helpful to me. So that's a good sign of showing my resume for college or a job or something.
We're not bad people. We just make poor choices. And I think that's one of our slogans, because you have a lot of people in youth court that are real good people, real talented, has a lot going for them, but they just made one poor choice and we're letting them here. But it's like we could always change that. No matter who you are, where you coming from, it's like you get that second chance and you never want to forget it.
In the area of child welfare, we have the blessing of a couple of enormous studies by an MIT economist named Joseph Doyle. He published one in 2007, one in 2008. Now, of course, the goal of a foster care placement, in theory, is to improve a child's life. Well, what Doyle found in the first study following 15,000 children, and in the other collecting data about 23,000, is that similarly maltreated children do better if they're left at home than if they are put in foster care.
I've spent 20 years now doing my homework in child welfare. I didn't intend to come into it as an adult. And it's serious enough for me to realize that the only way that this can occur is by partnering with the community and respecting the community with giving them the power that traditionally is held onto by professionals. They know what's best for our children. Our families know what's best for our children.
We work with the entire family system, no matter what it is. We don't work 9 to 5. It's 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's at 3 o'clock in the morning, and if you have a contract that says that you can only work with a kid for 10 hours a week, you better be ready to work with them on that 11th and 12th and 13th hour. You have to deal with their educational needs. You have to deal with their health issues. You have to deal with safety issues. You have to deal with a wide variety of things. The simple fact is, when a youngster is in placement with the Youth Advocate Program, we have an 85% success rate.
We now have a 20-year history of doing this initiative. It is in more than half of the states in the country. Over 100 localities are participants in the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. There's been enormous savings in public dollars by closing down detention units and detention facilities that have now been redeployed to community-based programs. There's no sacrifice in public safety. In fact, most of these jurisdictions have better public safety results than they had before because they lock up kids who need to be locked up, but only those kids, and they have gotten over their addiction to incarceration. And most importantly to this morning's discussion, in JDAI sites, we have some of the first empirical evidence that juvenile justice systems can actually measurably reduce racial disparities in their system.
On average, you spend about $150 to $200 to $300 a day to keep a kid in placement. On average, the Youth Advocate Program could charge about $60 a day. So let's do the math. It's 365 times $200 a day gives you $73,000 per year. The cost for working with 2 youngsters at the Youth Advocate Program's rate is $21,900. So that means that for every 1 youngster in prison for a year, in detention for 1 year, you can actually work with 7 youngsters in the community.
Government officials who knowingly choose from among a range of alternatives to continue the practice that we know is discriminatory. We can infer that if they made a choice to do the thing that is discriminatory from among these alternatives, then they must have intended to discriminate. They must be intentionally disregarding the injury that their discriminatory practice causes. And it is that inference that we're here to strategize together about how we can create the context in which we can put them on notice and then have that inference. And if they should continue practice as usual, then we believe a successful civil rights case could be brought under a statute called Section 1983, which is a way that you can actually hold entities responsible for discriminatory effect. So we think we have a breakthrough here if we were to litigate. But we really don't want to litigate. As somebody who started my career in civil rights litigation, as somebody who works at the Public Defender Service litigating cases there, litigation is a difficult strategy to really make change. It is far more effective and efficient to make change by having people in communities and people in authority do the right thing.
These systems could do it if they were interested. There are a ton of jobs being paid to just process misery and pass papers from A to Z, and jurisdictions that care about it get results quickly. Other jurisdictions just give excuses as to why it can't happen. But be on notice, as what this lawsuit theory is trying to show, it is not impossible, it is not offense-driven, it is solvable, and if people have the political will and the care and caring to do it, you can move these numbers.